You just want me to tell him you got ejected? I guess we got a pilot at our house, and he says he got ejected. So he ejected from the plane. So we just see if we could get some ambulance, please.
I'm sorry, what happened?
We got a pilot in the house, and I guess he landed in my backyard, and we were trying to see if we could get a ambulance to the house, please.
Okay, we're getting help on the way. Give me just a moment.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. As I always say, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here on the studio line with me. My co-host today is Shaman Isis. Shaman, welcome. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Billy.
Absolutely. Shaman and I, every once in a while, do these little discussions. We did one recently involving politics, and we're going to kind of stay with that theme today. We're going to veer off just a little bit and talk about AI. Of course, AI is very much related to what's going on with politics, and the legislation and some of the other stuff is trying to catch up to the technology, and we'll get into that a little bit. If you've never checked out the program before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast, and glad to have you here. You can find the Billy Dees podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. And also, we are doing the streams, the videos, video version on X, which if you're saying, what is X? It's basically the old Twitter. So there's versions, people call it Twitter X, people call it some other things. Technically, I believe the name is X, as in X marks the spot. How have things been for you on X? Have you noticed a difference in the way the platform behaves?
Honestly, I love X. I have a good time on it. I've met so many incredible people on the platform. Some of the most amazing spiritual people that I've worked with and gotten to know are on X. So I'm having a ball.
Well, that's great. Shaman, your podcast, obviously you mentioned the spirituality, and you have a new book out, and we're going to have to do an episode about the book. What's the name of the book again?
Memory Mansion.
Memory Mansion. Okay, we're definitely going to have to do one about that, because I know a little bit about this book. I've been following it, and your story as a memoir is actually almost like a novelesque type story. It's kind of like a thriller type thing with all that you've been through. So we're definitely going to have to explore that sometime soon. We'll start. You and I kind of chatted about this story. This has to do with the F35. And I'm very critical of this, and I'll tell you why. Mm-hmm. The amount of money that it's one thing. Here's how the game is played. If you are against too much spending on defense, people come at you as you're un-American, you want a weak defense, you want this and that. And that's not the case at all. I'm okay with having a big budget for defense. And I believe the United States needs that because of the fact it's just like being the richest house in the neighborhood. You got to be able to protect it. With that being said, what I don't like is money being squandered. And, there was the issue a while back with the tanks that we went ahead and built, even though the Pentagon said they didn't want them. That one often gets cited, but it's true. And it really makes my blood boil when troops, our finest men and women, go into battle. They don't have the armor they need. They don't have enough bullets, like happened at one point in the Iraq War a number of years ago. It's infuriating to think that we spend these billions and trillions of dollars on defense, and the soldiers in the field do not have the stuff that they need. Now, if you're not familiar with this F-35 program, this is a fighter jet, and this program has been plagued with all kinds of problems from the very beginning, cost overruns like you wouldn't believe. We're talking about numbers here in terms of dollars that are actually hard to calculate. One of my favorite quotes, one of the Congress people said a number of years ago, is $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and pretty soon you're talking real money. And that's exactly right. And software issues, just all kinds of really odd stuff with this F-35. Yes, the F-35 is the latest generation of fighter jet. It represents, like I said, not just the individual fighter itself, but the whole program for this model of jet is, I couldn't even begin to tell you how many hundred. I couldn't even begin to tell you. It's a staggering amount of money. Okay. Well, I believe this was, what was it? South Carolina? Let me double check this. I believe it was. Yes. South Carolina, correct. The details of this are unknown, but for whatever reason, a pilot is flying along in this multi-million-dollar jet, and he decides to eject. I've heard different stories as to why. Some people said there was weather issues, which, I don't know whether he had some sort of a mechanical problem, but he ended up ejecting from the jet.
Mm-hmm.
And it came to light today that after he landed in his parachute somewhere, that he actually called 911, which I
I'm sorry, but when I read that, I was like, what?
Yes, that's pretty hard to believe. But anyway, over the last few days, the news was that this jet had continued on without a pilot. And there was a lot of speculation about whether it was on autopilot. Autopilot can mean a number of different things. Depending on how it's set up, typically autopilot just kind of keeps the plane at the setting you've given it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's following a destination.
Yeah.
But we don't know. And this thing continued on for a while. And I found this hard to believe, too. But apparently, the military was asking civilians, hey, by the way, you see this jet?
Oh my God. I love our military. I'm a huge supporter, particularly of the Air Force and the Navy. But yeah, I found this to be, I understand it from, like, if it's a security related issue, you can't find the jet. You don't have a tracking system on the jet. Nobody knows where the jet is at. Let's go ask the people if they know where the jet is at. The big multi-million-dollar jet. But I kind of get why they don't have LoJack on our very expensive fighter pilot plane.
You think that it given them find my plane on their phone? That would have been something. Yeah. I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
But anyway, this thing went on evidently, and it crashed somewhere. I don't know if it was 80 miles, 90 miles away. And here again, that alone, obviously, it was probably out of fuel, so there probably wasn't a big flame. But this is a pretty big thing falling out of the sky. You think there'd been a lot of debris, a lot of smoke, and they still couldn't find it. So I have a problem with this because, the Pentagon admitted not too long ago that they cannot cannot do anything with these hypersonic missiles that China has. And they admitted that they're several years behind. Now, here's everybody tells me, the United States spends more money than the next 10 countries combined on defense. Well, what the hell are they doing with it?
Can I tell you what I think the problem is with the whole, like, they have a huge budget. We all know that. Yes, it gets wasted. I think one of the problems is that when you have a corporation or a company, most of the heads of departments get deeply involved in not only the budgeting up front, but the consistently revisiting the money and the budget and cutting and trimming to keep costs and things from being wasted. And I think this is just my assumption. I think that because of the way the military is structured and it's kind of a top-down organization, that people on the lower ends of the rankings don't feel necessarily empowered to be pointing out waste and helping develop a feedback system that will prevent massive amounts of waste. And in the desire to get things accomplished, oftentimes people don't revisit why things are being done or how they're being done or what the costs of them are. And then when you add to that the military industrial complex, which, feasts off of our potential for being in war at any given time. And we have this kind of twofold thing going on where nobody's really taking, I say no one, most people are not taking responsibility for what's being spent. And then on top of that, you've got really powerful groups that make a lot of money off of those budgets. So
yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of the talking points were that this was a stealth fighter, so therefore they couldn't track it. But here again, my opinion on this is that we have to know where our own stuff is, and it's stealth to the enemy, not stealth to us. They have their own stealth jets that we're not supposed to be able to track. And it would be like not knowing where a nuclear submarine is. It's somewhere in the Atlantic. Who knows?
Can you do that? See, I don't think that, especially when you look at AI can actually look into a room and use the plugs in the room to read the energy of the room and tell where everybody is. So I'm pretty sure that if the plane has a signal like that that's saying, hey, I'm over here, we can pick it up, but so can everybody else. And I think that might be the problem.
Yeah, that's certainly part of the issue. But here again, there has to be if you look at the $1 trillion that we have spent, trillions over the past number of years on defense, there has to be a way to keep inventory, because there's nothing stopping a rogue pilot from flying that thing to Russia or doing whatever. You got to be able to keep track of your own stuff. There has to be a way to do that. And I'm going to go as far to say, with AI and some of the things that are going on with satellite technology now, I'm going to have to say that trying to keep a fighter plane or anything stealth in relation to radar is, I mean, those days are behind us. I mean, the technology that's in some of these satellites now, I mean, they can find a basketball on a court, and you live in New York. After it snowed, they can find that basketball underneath the snow on the playground and pretty much determine how much air is inside of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know that alone is in the chess game that is, like the old arguments about the bullet and the shield. I'm not exactly sure where we are with that now, but I'd have to say that sneaking around aircraft carriers and planes and things like that are quickly becoming a thing of the past.
Yeah.
But anyway, I do
wonder, I have to say, one other answer to this whole, because whenever I smell bizarreness that doesn't actually make a lot of sense, particularly when it involves the government, my intuition starts going ding, ding, ding. And my intuition was going off in the very beginning. And I know that our government is often testing things and they can't, I understand the need for secrecy for some things. So sometimes when these things happen, it involves something that they had to test that they can't really get into. So there's always the potential that the reason the explanation doesn't make a lot of sense is because what they were doing isn't what we're being necessarily told. So
yeah, that's all true. There was a time when I used to say, well, maybe there's top secret, high level tech things going on that I don't think anybody knows. I don't think anybody knows shit, to be honest with you. I don't think they know anything. I think that's a lot of bloviating. And I honestly, when it comes to these UFOs, my suspicion is that those things are man-made, and it's probably done by somebody who's a lot smarter than us, who isn't letting what's happening to our educational system here happen where they're at. But anyway, enough said about that. We'll move on to the next thing. RFK. We touched on him the last time we talked. I find him intriguing.
I do too. Yeah.
I find him intriguing. He says a lot of things about the border that I believe are true, that neither the Republicans or the Democrats want to hear. Like a lot of the mess that's down south, not only Mexico, but farther down, a lot of those problems have been caused by us.
Oh, absolutely.
And the other things that he gets into about the vaccinations and the book about Fauci, I have not read. A lot of people that I know that are very close to me have read it and said it's stunning because he's got references and everything in there. So he's a controversial figure. And if you don't know, there's been a couple of security issues with his campaign. Most recently, somebody was found within the last number of days, pretending to be a security person and apparently had a gun or some sort of a lethal weapon with him. Okay, he's Bobby Kennedy's son, who was the brother of the president. He has been asking for Secret Service protection, and the Biden administration has been denying it. Now, just to be objective here. The other side is saying that for whatever reason, technically he's not eligible yet. I'm not exactly sure what the parameters are, but it has something to do with where you are in the polls, how close you are to the election, and all these other kind of things. But let's be honest here.
It sounds like BS to me.
Yeah, it sounds like BS, especially when you consider that his family has been hunted. For lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. I mean, it has been hunted. And every time
the ball, not once but twice, in being able to protect his families. I think that alone calls for him to have Secret Service, and they're amazing. Yeah. I've been fortunate to work with them several times, and I went to one of his events because I just wanted to hear what he had to say. I'm an independent, but I got to engage with the security, and I could tell they weren't Secret Service, and he deserves our Secret Service. Yeah. He does.
He absolutely does. And I got to tell you, it kind of makes me wonder what goes on in these private conversations in the White House. You would think somebody would say, hey, Mr. President, it's been well publicized that you have denied him Secret Service protection. What happens if he gets shot?
Yeah.
How's that going to look for you? Okay, forget the moralistic standpoint of it. That would be really a bad look. That would be one of those things that would not look good on a resume, right? I got a third Kennedy shot because I denied him Secret Service protection.
Yeah, but we can't find $3 trillion in spending.
Oh yeah. That here again, that gets back to that spending. And here again, when it comes to the national defense, that amount of money. Getting back to who Jon Stewart was championing, those 9/11 workers had to beg and plead for the money for their cancer that they picked up from all that dust and all those chemicals down there. And we just fork over billions to other countries.
Other things, yeah.
Yeah. And no matter how you feel about the Ukraine, if the Ukraine people were down there at 9/11, maybe they would have got something. I don't know.
Yeah. You want to know an interesting story, Billy, and I share it because it is actually really interesting. When 9/11 happened, I knew the air was toxic. I knew it was. I could just intuitively and also physically. And I tried to tell people, and they were like, "Oh no, it can't be." They would tell us to leave the island. And the EPA got on television and mentioned that the air was fine. And I knew I was like, they are literally lying to people. Yeah. And then of course later on we have all these people get sick, and it turns out that it was toxic. So we have to get to a place, and I think this is one of the beautiful places about us being able to have this conversation out loud. We as a country have to get to a place where we have honest conversations about the stupidity of some of the things that we do. We send our men and women to war. They should get the finest care when they return. When things like this happen, or like Maui fire, we should be taking care of business the way that we're capable of when we really care. And it's moments like this when we say, this doesn't make any sense. We always have money for war. We don't seem to have money for taking care of people.
That's so true. That is absolutely so true. And I wish I was, president for 5 minutes. I would say Pentagon, all that, nobody gets a dime until all those veterans are taken care of. Yeah. No, nobody. We don't buy another bullet. We don't buy another plane. We don't buy jack until all these veterans who have problems get the health care that they need. But anyway, that's kind of where that is. RFK. There have been a lot of people suggesting a lot of crazy things. Could it be possible? What would you say to Donald Trump and RFK on the same ticket? It's probably never going to happen. RFK has said it'll never happen, but there's a lot of people talking about it. And you know how politics is.
Parties.
Yes, I know, but there's a lot of they've been kicking that around, and I didn't even know. I can't believe there's anything in the Constitution that would prevent people from different parties from being on the same ticket, because the founding fathers didn't even want parties. They said don't do it.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think part of RFK's problem is he is trying to speak the truth, and we have a lot of positioned as truth coming from Trump, and I think that makes him very threatening. So he's not going to get a lot of support from the Democratic Party because they're scared of somebody who's willing to say what they believe to be the truth.
Yeah. We talked about this a little. I'll just mention it again. last couple of public appearances Joe Biden has made, not to be mean. This is speaking very objectively as a human being. I don't want to see him in a situation that he can't handle or being forced to do something that he doesn't want to do emotionally and or intellectually or any other way. I can't imagine someone in his condition. We're already a year out from the election. And then until he serves another term and gets inaugurated and then serves, would be about another 5 years.
Yeah.
On top of the age that he is now.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that that's possible.
I don't believe that the Democratic Party really, when the behind closed doors, believes it's possible either. Either he's going to have to step down or something's going to have to give.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Time will tell.
They want to hold on to the power so desperately that they're willing to force this through when they have alternative candidates because he's their best bet, they believe. And that to me is it just shows you where politics is at.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I can't believe in the back room here again, getting back to the conversations that are happening behind closed doors. Somebody said, what are we going to do? The calendar, the pages are going by, and we better come up with something pretty soon. All right.
It reminds me of the Supreme Court justices that literally stay around until they are being pushed around by their healthcare helpers.
Yeah, that's the thing. This idea that people in Congress, and even though they keep getting voted in both the House and the Senate, and they just keep serving and serving until they drop like the Pope, I just don't know that that's a good idea. We mentioned AI a little moment ago, and some news with AI. Let me just preface this just to give the audience some background. I don't believe that AI is the stuff of science fiction in terms of it's going to be this computer that wakes up and just decides to take over the world. I don't believe that's going to happen. That's not to say it's impossible. Who knows? But I think a lot of those stories are overstated. What AI does in its best form is it helps people. Let's say if you are doing research, and let's say out of your day, 100% of your time, 80% of your time is repetitive tasks doing this research, whether it be working the same problems, matching the same things up. What AI does at its best is recognize repetitive tasks and take care of that for you. So instead of just 20% of your time being innovative with your human mind, you can be doing a lot more of that because this technology is doing the repetitive tasks for you. Where I do believe it can be abused is, yes, it can help somebody who's doing research, let's say, trying to discover a cure for cancer, absolutely. But it can also help bad actors, people who are trying to figure out your password. Okay.
Well, look what happened with the whole vaccine situation and us now finding out that things are in those vaccines. That's a very good example.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, and here again, this technology has kind of gotten past the legal system, which is kind of very often the case. The laws and everything that we have has to catch up with the technology. Tell us a little bit about what happened this week.
They finally got around to having a meeting in I think it was DC. It could be New York. I'm not sure the location, but they brought in a lot of the major players in the artificial intelligence world to have a conversation about regulation and the need for regulation, which is something I've been talking about for over 10 years, the need for regulation. We have this tendency to wait until things are behemoths before we actually do something about it because it takes our political system so long to deal with anything. And we don't have that kind of luxury with AI. It's moving too quickly and it is going to be too powerful. Do I foresee a huge, apocalyptic scenario from the films? Not necessarily, but we will have isolated incidents because it's been allowed access to powerful systems, and we will have things happen that will show us why we need to be in have regulations. But I don't want to see what happened with search engines and social media happen with artificial intelligence. A couple of people, particularly in the situation with search engines, you have Google telling everybody in the world what information is most important and relevant to what they're searching. And they're picking very specific news organizations, and they have a point of view. And I love Google, but that's actually very serious. And the fact that we've never really talked about that in our society is reflective of why addressing artificial intelligence now is so important, because it is going to be such a massively powerful tool, Billy. Anywhere you see a job where there is a lot of repetitiveness within that job, those jobs will be replaced with artificial intelligence. So McDonald's, for example, is testing an AI run restaurant out in California where there are no people, and that's going to proliferate, and it's going to take over and affect every industry. I personally am very excited about artificial intelligence. I believe it's going to usher in an abundance unlike we've ever seen before in our world, but it's also going to require us to get in front of it to make sure that the bad actors don't use it against us for greedy reasons.
That can be tough. Just like with nuclear weapons, it's really easy to say, you know what? We shouldn't allow this. It's immoral. And, we're not going to check into this any further. The only problem is that once the genie is out of the bottle, and now, for example, nuclear technology is not as exclusive as it was, in the 1950s. A lot of people can access it. Mm-hmm. And the idea that some maniac leader somewhere isn't going to get his or her hands on it and start to develop it, then who's going to be boss? Then you're behind all of a sudden. And we could go on with cloning, a lot of other things. I understand how scary that is. But the idea that we could encounter somebody on the battlefield, and this sounds really crazy, but encounter soldiers that aren't quite human.
Oh, that is definitely coming. That is in our future, and not that far away.
Yeah, and the idea that we should be ignoring this because it's immoral is going to really put you behind it when it's aimed at you someday. So that's a really tough dilemma to be in. But nonetheless, I really think that we need to stay on top of this and understand the technology and make sure us as a country, we are the leaders on this, and we know where it's going, because like we're talking about here, this has the potential to get crazy. And you have any last thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, it's wonderful because people will be able to get at more accurate diagnosis, and they'll get better treatment that's much more accurate. So there's wonderful things about artificial intelligence. But when you look at a situation like with the robots that are being rolled out to police areas, we are not far away from those robots being able to make arrests. And how does a robot judge and justify being in that kind of powerful position? We're really not very far from that. And so it's really important that we talk about regulations across, all industries and all aspects of how artificial intelligence can be friendly and can be utilized, but also be used for the wrong reasons. So yeah. It's interesting, and I do think that we have to be more concerned with more insidious, hidden bad potential than the obvious. Because we always think of these like large scale things, like what if it sets off a bomb? What if it does this or that? And I think when you look at something like, and I mentioned vaccines, because that's a very insidious way for someone with bad intentions to do something to a lot of people in a very quiet way.
Yeah, sure.
So it's
I'm going to throw a curveball at you. This kind of occurred to me while we were talking here. Neuralink.
Yeah.
For those who may not know, simply put, it has the ability to transmit signals through your nervous system. So, for example, this is a Elon Musk project. They taught this monkey to play this video game with his hands, just like you play any, when you got your little things and you're playing your video games, you got the controllers in your hand. They implanted a Neuralink chip in this baby's skull, in this monkey's skull. And this monkey was sitting in front of the video game, and he was playing the game with his mind.
Yep.
And the original intention would be for people like, for example, if you know Stephen Hawking, people like that, who was paralyzed by ALS.
Oh, yeah.
And any number of people who have had severe neck injuries, spine injuries, and so forth. The idea is that it makes them much more easy to communicate when they are, when they can't move. But there's other implications for this as well. And one of which is that rather than try to fix the spinal column if it's cut, which is pretty near impossible. What the idea is you can have a transmitter and a receiver on each side of the break, to where the signals coming from the brain would go through the Neuralink and go to the part of the spine that has been cut off, thereby enabling movement.
Yeah.
First of all, what do you think of this technology? And I'm going to follow up with a real zinger. Go ahead.
I'm actually a huge fan of Neuralink, and I would actually like to have it done because I think it's really interesting. But I know some people are like, "Oh my goodness," I think it's amazing. But we're already there with that kind of thing. They've got contact lenses that can zoom in on things, like they're things other things that you can put in your body that allow communication. I think it's fascinating, and yes, it's kind of scary, but we're walking around with a phone in our hands at all times that is provoking and changing our behavior and our choices.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's a whole ton of difference in putting it under the skin. I think it just sounds a lot scarier, but I do find it fascinating as it's just its own topic. Yeah, and just so that I personally believe that we communicate without saying a word.
Yeah.
Already. So this is kind of like it's enhancing it. It's like body modification for wellness and health, and it's going to happen.
Sure.
Whether Neuralink becomes the next big thing or something else does.
Well, that's where I was going to ask you, and I'll end the tail end of our program here with the $100,000 question. Now, this is going to be the $100,000 question. Okay. Let me preface this by saying speech development in human beings was very critical to how we developed, including how our brain evolved and a lot of other things. The idea that we could do something beyond pointing somewhere, but showing a destination, explain why we have to go there, and all these other things. Very, very major component of our development. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of confusion as to how well people can even think when they don't know how to speak. People that have been found in the wilderness and all that are almost always impaired in some way. So speech is very critical to our development. Let's just say that. To what degree, you can argue about. At the same time, speech has canceled out a lot of the other ways that we communicate. For example, pack hunters and things like that, wolves and all that, very clearly can communicate with each other non-verbally. And there's a lot of people who say we have lost a lot of our ability to know what's going on around us, how we communicate with each other, and a lot of these other things. We've lost that ability because we've relied on it being spelled out for us. Yes. So
but we're speaking all the time, even without our words.
Exactly. So where I was going with this is, like you said, verbal and nonverbal communication. From your aspect of, I know how much you live and breathe spirituality and awareness and communication and all these other things. Does Neuralink have any implications for us being more in touch with ourselves in that regard?
Oh, absolutely. I think what is beautiful about something like Neuralink and products like that is that they will be able to supply instant information to us about our current state and allow us to partner, if you will, with our technology to align ourselves into a better, more spiritual state, get us back into our best vibration, get us back into positive alignment. I think that's what is so amazing about being able to have a real-time biofeedback, is that we'll be able to stop a bad mood before it starts. We'll be able to enhance our consciousness and elevate our consciousness by being able to get in touch with it more deeply and more quickly and more powerfully. That's one of the beautiful things about the technology. One of the reasons I'm a huge fan of AI is that I try to look at these developments for how they will be able to assist us in the world to be more self-actualized, because I think you have to kind of look at how do we spend this in the best possible way? How do we use this in the best possible way? We have unprecedented numbers of people with mental health challenges around the world, over 1 billion people dealing with mental health challenges, like depression and anxiety. When we have something like a Neuralink, we'll be able to better manage that and be able to offer a solution for people that helps teach them the art of living in happiness, the science of happiness, and give them the tools that are harder. Not everybody can develop their meditation, overnight. And who wants to spend extra years being miserable when you can partner with technology and find a faster, easier way to develop mind, body, and soul harmony?
Absolutely, Shaman. We are going to have to do this again because we have some great conversations. I just love talking to you. I've caught some of your episodes, some real interesting topics. One of them being the difference, or I should say the clarification between spirituality and religion. These are the types of topics you can find on Shaman's show. Tell people where they can find you online and your podcast.
Absolutely. You can find the links to all of my social media platforms and my podcast on shamanisis.com. My podcast airs on Apple, YouTube, Buzzsprout, Good Pods, all the usual places, and Spotify, of course.
Yes, the usual. And
I do put full episodes on X as well.
Yes. And that's exactly. I was going to, my little spiel. You can find me on Twitter, real easy to find at Billy Dees, now X, Twitter X. And find me on, I'm on most major social media. I'm not on every platform that's out there, but most of the big ones, real easy to find, just Billy Dees. And lately, we have been putting long form content on Twitter X, which in years past wasn't possible. Tucker Carlson and a lot of other individuals, I believe Roseanne, I could go on here. There's a lot of people that are putting long form content on there. I found out today that on X, there's going to be a lot of lives and all that are going to light up a different color, and they're going to be kind of pushed to the top, kind of like Spaces are. So he's really going after the space that YouTube occupies, in addition to the standard microblogging, which is what tweeting was. So it's going to be an interesting time for the platform. Do check us out. Shaman, thank you so much for being the co-host today. Great conversation, as always.
Thanks, Billy. I appreciate it. Always great conversations.
Absolutely. And stick around. Follow us on social media. I'm Billy Dees. I will be back next week with another edition of the Billy Dees podcast. Thank you very much.
Bye.
You are listening to the Billy Dees podcast. Follow Billy Dees on Twitter, now the X platform, at Billy Dees.